Real quick, my fire starters, I've got to talk to you about my favorite modern horror films. It seems we're knee deep in the spooky season. October has taken over the city streets, leaving people's houses on the cusp of being haunted forever. While we still have some time, I wanted to introduce you to my favorite films over the past 5 years. These horror films will range in release from 2013 to 2018. There are definitely some additions this year that have caught my attention, but I really wanted to focus on what we consider modern horror. The idea behind this list was that I hear all too often that modern horror sucks. And every time I ran into somebody like that, I would give them the exact same movie recommendations. It got to the point that it started to feel rote. Like people had to know that these films existed. Fortunately for me, they did not. I love horror more than any other genre, but I am definitely more geared towards the exceptional pieces rather than the schlock that comes with most lower budget films. I have curtailed this list a little bit to talk about lesser known films, or ones that may have been passed on because of the series they're attached to. That means stuff like Babadook, Lights Out, or It Follows have been pushed to the side for some of the more off the beaten path horror. Of course, this list is the objective truth, and no one can contest the brilliance of these films. Horror is always going to be subjective, and these movies sparked my imagination. Before we get into it, I wanted to thank my patrons Chris Markinson, Jeff Strait, and Stormy OK. If you want to support us, make sure to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/JustinDHeard. Make sure to like this episode or I'm gonna set you on fire. Doesn't that sound lovely? Also, I'd like to say spoilers for the following films: Banshee Chapter, The Black Coat's Daughter, The Canal, Curse of Chucky, A Dark Song, Hereditary, Last Shift, The Look-See Episode 1, The Wedding Hand, Oculus, Prince of Darkness, Suspiria 2018, The Void. If you like what you see, let me know. I'd love to continue to talk about what I see as some of the best horror we've had in the last few years, as well as some of the more popular titles. Oh, and this is Dubious Consumption. One, Suspiria 2018. Why, oh why, did I pick one of my new favorite films as the first one for me to talk about? I must be a glutton for punishment. The Suspiria remake took me by surprise. I'm not a fan of the original, so if you're a diehard, keep that in mind. I found the original a little bit too much style over substance. This new reimagining is dense. That's the word. While this is a long movie, I am reminded of something Roger Ebert said. Essentially, no bad movie is too long and no good movie is too short. I have taken this to heart with Suspiria. I would love to watch an even more expanded version of this, despite how dense the film already is. This is a decidedly different take on the material. Instead of investigating the mystery behind the strange occurrences at the Dance Academy, we are told from the very first scene that we are dealing with a secret society of witches. Honestly, it feels more like they combined the original and Suspiria's follow-up Inferno. A lot of the world building for the Three Mothers came from that film instead of the original Suspiria. The other thing the remake traded in was the color palette. Instead of vibrant, otherworldly colors, the remake settled on an admittedly subdued scheme. However, it now has a dense world that is grounded in the 80s and the Berlin Wall. One of the reasons I absolutely love it is that it feels like there's a story around every other corner. We just happen to be following this one. While the original film gave us more of a dream logic premise with the ethereal goblin soundtrack and the over-the-top visuals, Suspiria 2018 spends a lot more time settling you in the world, making it tactile. Instead of the Dance Academy being more of a background detail, the 2018 version makes it essential to the plot. Dancing is the foundation of their magic. You get this feeling right from the start of Susie's interview. There's something inherently different about these dancers and their movements. While we get several examples of this and how they use the magic early on, it's not until Sarah's exploration of the dark corridors inside the academy that we really get a glimpse of the true horrors waiting just around every corner. The last act of this film takes on a surreal tone that works, but is definitely the most stylistic flourish in the movie. Add to that some absolutely interesting casting with Tilda Swinton. This is not an experience to be missed. In the end, all I can say is that despite its length, it has become one of my new favorite films. Number 2, Last Shift 2014. Despite the cover art making this out to be another Hellraiser-style horror, this is a surprisingly subdued film. Honestly, it's just a lot of fun. Not only are we introduced to a rookie in an all but abandoned station, we also get vague suggestions about the leftover evidence possibly affecting the state of the all but abandoned precinct. Even though all the calls are supposed to be routed to another station, her night starts out with a distressed woman calling. From that point, the creepiness continues to ramp up by degrees until it seems like the ghosts have all but taken over. This is some of the creepiest buildups I've seen. Most of the movie is carried on Juliana Harkavy's reaction to the craziness happening around her. Add to that concoction a dose of daddy issues, where her father was one of the arresting officers of the Payman cult and died over the course of that night. For those that have seen Hereditary, the name Payman might sound a little bit familiar, as it was the main demon in that movie. Whoops, spoilers. The cult leader, John Michael Payman, is an enigmatic figure, as all great psychotic leaders should be. And even in death, he continues to taunt our rookie. Add in a healthy dose of cryptic visitors to the abandoned station, and you have a haunted house masterpiece. One of the things I love so much is that the film was crafted to be seen through Harkavy's eyes only, so we're permanently in her point of view. When the final twist happens, it's a natural evolution of what came before. Now, I can't recommend these just yet, but I did find the director did Most Likely to Die, Her Last Will, and Extremity in the years afterwards. I will definitely be checking out those films in the upcoming days. Number 3, The Canal, 2014. I have to say this. I love Irish horror. It's one of the few genres I don't hear enough about. Some of the staples include The Hallow, Citadel, The Lodgers, Grabbers, and another film on this list, A Dark Song. The Canal follows a film archivist who suspects his wife is cheating on him. When his fears are confirmed, he grabs a hammer only to toss it in the canal before retreating into a grungy bathroom. This scene is so freaking intense, especially when this ethereal man leans forward and speaks in all but guttural sounds. As our lead passes out, he sees a shadowy figure murdering his wife. There was something wrong with our lead, but the events right before this solidified this insanity. After this, things only get worse. He has a detective hot on his trail as they try to locate his missing wife. Even when he has people that believe in him, the evidence doesn't hold up. Another one of my favorite moments comes when he is presenting this footage to his coworker, only for her to see nothing at first. But as she continues to watch, the creature gets closer and closer until it breaks through the wall and strangles her to death. The thing that captures my imagination about this film is that it's mostly about someone willing a spirit into existence while no one else is able to see it. However, when this has been explored in the past with films like Candyman, they still make it a point to verify that the titular creature does indeed exist. Not so here, though you could say the tragic ending does lend itself to the more supernatural route. You can see how The Canal has influenced horror in Crypt TV's The Look-See. In the first episode of The Wedding Hand, we see a curiously familiar bathroom scene, albeit without the intense atmosphere of The Canal's decrepit bathroom. As you can see here, the look-see borrowed heavily from the Canal's unnerving representation of a stranger in a bathroom. Although it doesn't end the same, you can see a lot of the same building blocks that made the Canal so successful. This is a wonderful horror film that works from its baseline premise and goes to places I wouldn't have imagined. It's got some wonderfully creative set pieces that, at times, felt out of place in such a low-key movie. Though, like my last film we talked about, we find out in the end that we've been following an unreliable narrator. 4. Curse of Chucky, 2013. So I have to admit this. This was my son's introduction to the Chucky series. Now he's adamant that he is too young for Chucky, though he insists that he's old enough for Alien and Predator movies. I love this freaking movie. While I was initially put off by Chucky's redesign, the movie works perfectly in reintroducing Charles Lee Ray in this dark gothic mansion. Add to that, we got Fiona Dourif, the daughter of Chucky's voice actor Brad Dourif, as a wheelchair-bound woman that is tied with Charles Lee Ray's past. What I love so much about this movie is its aesthetic. It trades in the larger world of the Chucky series for a single location, as does its follow-up, Cult of Chucky. It also has a much more reserved take on the killer doll, keeping us from really seeing Chucky move or talk for the first 45 minutes of the film. My favorite scene in the film involves a variation on Hitchcock's Bomb Under the Table. This dinner scene where, in true Hitchcockian fashion, we know one of the bowls has rat poison in it. The table is set. Then they spin the camera so we lose track of the bowls and which one has the poison, if we ever knew at all. For several minutes, we have characters hinting that it might be their bowl, before finally one person escapes the table only to be killed in an entirely different fashion. The other big twist for the franchise is that an hour in, the makeup on Chucky's doll starts to show. It is then peeled off by one of the characters, revealing that this soft reboot of Chucky is actually a canonical sequel to the entire Child's Play canon. This was definitely one of those moments that I honestly don't think I had the same feeling until I watched the 2017 movie The Endless with its character revelation. The actual Child's Play connected timeline continued for one more film, Cult of Chucky, where it spends its time in a mental ward setting up absolutely stunning kills. The actual remake, Child's Play 2019, completely ditches Charles Lee Ray's contribution to the character, relegating it to a separate timeline and headspace. While the Charles Lee Ray timeline is currently in limbo while we wait for the television series, this is a more than worthwhile reinvention of what we fell in love with in the first place. 5. The Void, 2016. I've covered this film before in my favorite films seen in 2017. You should check that out. For those that haven't watched the video, let me just say this. It continues to be one of my favorite horror films, even 2 years later. It is a masterclass in using practical effects, as well as creating a creepy atmosphere. The way I like to describe this film is Hellbound Hellraiser 2 meets The Thing. I actually saw this right after another favorite of mine, Baskin, came out. They both have a lot of similarities. They're both about a group of people headed into a sinister underground structure where otherworldly phenomena is going down. The basic story is that a local cop finds a man all banged up on the side of the road. He is rerouted to a burned out hospital that is in the process of being moved out of. Shortly after he arrives, cultists surround the building and a pair of Winchester-style hunters arrive, intent on killing the man. Things take a turn for the worse when creatures begin to sprout from patients and the staff alike. The head doctor is killed in the scuttle, only for his body to disappear and then reveal that he is the leader of the cult and he's kidnapped the deputy's ex-wife. Together with the hunters, the deputy heads into the basement to face terrors from another dimension. While I mentioned The Thing, I would also like to point out that it has another John Carpenter film in its DNA, Prince of Darkness, which is also part of his Apocalypse trilogy. In fact, I say that both films have a very similar resolution to the bad guys. The fun thing here is that the people behind this were also a part of the amazing group behind films like Manborg and The Editor. While the lo-fi aesthetic of Manborg wasn't really for me, I did absolutely love the giallo insanity of The Editor.
Interesting how that name keeps coming up. Editor.
Having this type of lower budget but high in creativity background definitely translated into this kick-started The Void. Regardless, this is definitely one of my favorite horror movies and continues to impress as the years go on.